The stationary telephone.
May I please speak to Bobby?
Once on the wall or desk of nearly every home and business in the U.S.
Yes?
All over town, telephones are bringing people together.
The phone industry and all of telecommunications was controlled by the world's largest monopoly, and competition was thought impossible.
And start cutting those bills down to size.
Yet in just 40 years, we've gone from this to this.
It had a really great sort of intellectual approach in terms of the differences in technology over time. I think obviously in our era with cell phones, so I'm old enough to have lived in a world where there were still wired phones. Even some people, if I was at the right house, there were rotary phones. So I've actually seen it, but we're quite detached from that. But I thought that the historical backdrop was quite interesting to seeing people as they try to shift the cultural norms of how you interact in the world and how you interact with other people. Obviously, telephones was such a huge jump in technology, and I think we're at a point in our history where the jumps in technology are not as massive as they were in this period of time, from no cell phones to wired cell phones to wired cell phones to cell phones. I thought that progression is much bigger than what we've probably seen in the last 15 years. So I thought this piece in that sense was really sort of striking to see just how dramatic that was and how quickly we moved from that world, even though it took such a long time to get to that period in terms of human history. So I thought it had a great historical context, and it was quite informative and worked well in sort of using subjects that were very well knowledgeable as to how that played out over time, especially towards the end when we see some of the older characters who, not characters, more of the older subjects who had experienced the shift in technology over the course of their lifetime. I thought it really created interesting perspectives that made the piece easy to get into and easy to engage with. So I thought it was well done.
A really cool documentary about phone lines and the phone company AT&T and its monopoly on communications, and how communications in the U.S. and abroad has evolved from telephones to television to smartphones and everything between. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really interesting just to see how far we've come in such a short amount of time. This documentary had a vast, huge library of historical footage that it used throughout. It had great utilization of this footage and these sound bites that they picked. There was never a dull moment in this documentary. There's always something to look at as these people were explaining what they knew. The interview subjects were all very knowledgeable on what they were talking about as well. Just learning about AT&T's monopoly and how a lot of times I didn't truly realize the dangers of a monopoly. I knew that it suppressed smaller businesses and such, but hearing about how these monopolies not only, kill smaller businesses, but they're also killing innovation and new technologies that would come out if there was actual competition, and how important competition is to just new inventions, like innovation, moving forward, progress. So learning about that was very interesting for me, sort of a new perspective that I didn't have on monopolies before. So yeah, just seeing from the beginning of telephones to eventually smartphones, and then also hearing, the pros and cons of how far we've come, how, the pro being we have access to everything basically now, at the touch of our fingertips, but then that also means people basically have access to everything about us as well, which is a little bit scary. So there's kind of an ominous end to this documentary.
It was an excellent cross-section look at the movement of communications from being quite regulated and wired to being more unregulated and wireless as of today. I really enjoyed seeing the black and white footage of the early development of the telephone. I loved the old TV ads, many in support of AT&T and of other companies, especially the big competitor, MCI. There were many fascinating interviews of people from both U.S. governmental bodies and from corporations. It was really interesting to see how influential the genius Tom Whitehead was over the years. The footage of political and legal decisions really helped tell the tale effectively. The narrator voice was excellent, as was pace and editing.
I thought that it was really cool to see how the phone started
what started it and what now has led us to mobile phones, the telecommunications with that, with the cable TV, and how the competition came about. What led to all of that from when AT&T was the only person on the block, really. So I thought that that was really cool. I think the filmmakers were not only smart about the subject matter because it was interesting as well as educational, but they paced this really, really well. The voiceover that they did, I loved her voice. I thought there was a lot of warmth in it. She had a good pacing, but they edited this really well between the voiceover, the interviews of present day, and then going back to the past and showing images or video footage from the past. So everything kind of had this really lovely balance to it.
It was educational, it was historical, and it taught me something I didn't know. It found a way to make something as mundane as telephones very, very intriguing. I loved learning about the politics and the controversies and the underhanded tactics for monopolies and power that all came just from a phone line. And its historical account that this spanned literal decades. Just how long it went on for. But yeah, I feel like I learned a great deal from this, and again, this is everything that I love from documentaries.
I learned a lot about the policymakers, the regulators, and their role in this evolution of this telecommunications industry. It was very interesting to see these facts about the communications and new players getting into the game, like MCI, with new technologies and pioneering and challenging the monopoly. I couldn't help but wonder what AT&T and everything else would look like if things have been different. No government protecting their monopoly, no pressure from the public. If they would have gone in and invested in computers, for example, a lot of ifs, but I enjoyed learning about this industry that still today shapes how we communicate. It shapes our lives, how we interact with each other, and it was just very interesting.
It's really interesting to learn about how AT&T used to have a monopoly on telecommunications. I think one of the most fascinating things the film explores is about the impact of politics on business. Deregulation that brought about all this competition and the diversification of technologies and everything essentially stems from Nixon's vanity and security. His attempts to dismantle the media that he felt was hostile to him. The fact that the world could be so massively shaped by something as petty as that, I think is really fascinating, actually, and it shows how complex the world is and how the smallest things can have the biggest consequences. I also think the documentary does a really great job of charting the complexities of capitalism, ultimately, of how this system bears out, especially regarding ideas like monopoly versus competition, the way competition kind of eventually gives way back to monopoly again, and regulation and deregulation, all these things are really, really interesting. The documentary, I think, packages them and articulates them really well. It ends up being a really, really fascinating and insightful look into trying to understand how the world became the way it is, which I think makes it vital.